the whole process from start to finish, I was trying to work with the person to tell them that you had to be very careful because their inventory is the only thing that they were taking into consideration. And they weren't talking about ad costs, marketing, any of this. And so
Lunch with Lunch with
Hey everyone, this is Norm Farrar, aka the Beard Guy here, and welcome to another Lunch with Norm, the e-commerce and Amazon FBA podcast. Today we're going to be talking about tips for better supply chain planning. And we'll also be talking about how to build a proactive supply chain, the common seller mistakes, and how cash flow plays into it all. Welcome to another Lunch with Norm, the e-commerce and Amazon FBA podcast. All right, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about tips for better supply chain planning. Our guest is head of marketing over at 8Fig, a flexible funding platform that propels sellers to 8+ figures in revenue through supply chain tools. She's also a seasoned tech marketer, building a leading marketing teams at high growth startup ranging from seed to Series C Please welcome, it'll be our first time appearance on the podcast, Emma Borochoff. But before we do that, we're going to have a word from our sponsor. Are you struggling to keep up with your Amazon business? Do you need help from a skilled, reliable virtual assistant? Well, look no further than the Virtual Assistant Academy, or VAA Philippines. Founded by successful Amazon sellers who know the challenges of hiring quality VAs, VAA specializes in locating, screening, training, and supporting high-quality VAs in the Philippines. Their VAs receive extensive Amazon training and ongoing professional development and are committed to a long-term working relationship with you. Partner with VAA and experience the peace of mind knowing that you have a dedicated Amazon-trained VA who's up to date with the latest tools and trends in the dynamic Amazon marketplace. Head over to VAAphilippines.com and let VAA match you with your ideal VA today. Enjoy this episode and welcome, Emma.
Hi there.
Hey, you want to be an influencer?
Always. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. I was like, I want to side hustle. Yeah.
There we go. And you know what? And Fridays are always a Friday update on this challenge. And you've probably never heard of the challenge, but my other son challenged me to, instead of doing this to help sellers out and share information, to do the exact same thing with products. And I didn't have a single follower on any social media channel for product influence. So we said, oh, let's try to get 100,000 followers. Well, what we're finding is it's not the followers. And I've heard this from other influencers. If you're engaged and you're out there, man, if I didn't have the business that I'm doing right now, you can make not a bad living, not bad at all. And
no, it's a crazy. I mean, I'm in I'm in marketing, so I have to be aware of the world. And I actually have I have a foodstagram on the side, just for fun. It's literally just here's some pancakes I ate. But I have some friends who you can monetize, and also some of the networks too, especially if you're on YouTube too, you can get money.
Oh yeah. Yeah, YouTube is crazy right now.
Yeah. So it's it's pretty cool because you used to only be able to get kind of famous through, being discovered in a shopping mall. And now you can just kind of.
And we have brands. So anybody who comes through the challenge, that's one thing. We do all of their lives and videos and putting them on social for free. So, but if brands reach out and they want me to go and sponsored, let's put it that way, that's something I had no idea. And they're paying me thousands. I'm not an influencer.
But micro influencers are even more that's a whole other thing, because there's the people who have hundreds and thousands of followers, but they have kind of like a mass appeal. Maybe like their audience isn't as niche or engaged. But when you have kind of like the micro influencers, people have like thousands versus tens or hundreds of thousands, like, and you have a bunch of them, it can be really powerful. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a real area of marketing these days, especially like, I mean, for e-commerce product, like for products. Still for like B2B, you can do it,
Yeah.
but how many followers you're at 100,000 is the goal. So what are you at right now?
In total, about 8,000.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
yeah, but it's 1,000 here, 2,000 there. On Amazon Shopping, it's we've got 150 followers. So this is something that has to grow, and we've got to. We're always trying to figure out that next marketing move. But
Mm.
that's the toughest, and trying to work with brands that have good mailing lists that they can mail out. And we've got a couple lives coming up where brands that have one has 200,000 people on their mailing list. Well, do they want to go on live and like the brand let them know that they're going to get a 20 or 30% discount already off of a brand that they love? And that, like, for any listener, I mean, that is a great way to leverage your mailing list. I don't need to know your customers. I don't want to know. It's not like, oh, he's going to steal my customer. No, absolutely not. But what that does help is build the follower base, and you get the sales. So, anyways, that's enough of that.
I love it. Now marketing's great. Influencers. We're all influencers,
We all
Everything is
do.
content.
Yeah, and every seller is an influencer in some way. How you choose to influence is a whole other thing. Whether you're doing posts or if you're doing videos, you're an influencer for your brand. You're the brand ambassador. So,
Amen. Yeah.
yes. Okay, well, why don't we talk about tips for better supply chain planning? Although I do like talking about influencer marketing.
We can talk about, yeah, I feel like, I'm with AFIG, so kind of our core is supply chain, inventory management. But as a marketer, I'm always going to have some ideas about, marketing as well.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
all ties in together. Actually, inventory management, believe it or not, does tie in beautifully with, the campaigns that you're running, of course.
Well, as a seller, let's say a smaller seller to intermediate seller, uh, the big, the advanced sellers, they probably have this in place, most likely, not 100%. I have seen some that are horrible with supply chain management. But what can a seller do to be proactive to help build out their supply chain?
Yeah, in terms of proactive supply chain, it really just comes to having multiple relationships per piece in the supply chain. So, it does take time to build those relationships, but to make sure that you're always kind of looking for, as much as it is a relationship building exercise, it's at the end of the day, it's still a business relationship. So it's still really important to make sure that you have kind of backup suppliers for each piece, as well as, if you're looking for like air freight or by water, you have to have those different options available to you, because sometimes, some other piece in the supply chain is going to get slowed down, and then you're going to have to make up for it in another area. So maybe you'll have to pay a little bit more to get it faster, but at least you'll already have those relationships built. Because oftentimes, when there's a problem, the problem is happening right at that moment. And if you haven't already like done the groundwork to have those alternative vendors, you're not in a great spot. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's just like one of the pieces. Another thing that we kind of always preach at AFIC, because we do have like a supply chain mapping tool. Map your supply chain. Like, I think some of these things sound like common knowledge, and for sure a lot of sellers are, it's like, okay, yeah, they've done that. But a lot of times it's like you are more reactive than proactive, because things are just going off the rails, supply chain. Like, you never you never really know what's going to happen. But by really mapping out all the different pieces, another thing that we really recommend too is once you do kind of map out your whole supply chain and like break down where you're going to be spending different amounts of money, because it's like, okay, you have to put down the deposit and then you pay a certain amount like a month later. And then, even though it's like one block of product, you have a lot of different like paying moments. And then you are constantly purchasing more batches of inventory. So at any given moment, you have inventory in production, in transit, in a holding warehouse, in FBA. And so to be able to really understand everything mapped out, understand where those pieces are, and also when certain payments are due, you can just be in a better place in terms of like things won't fall through the cracks, or at least not as easily.
One of the things that we've talked about before is building your manufacturer into this. And especially now, it's a good time to do it, but renegotiating terms where you can negotiate, extra terms. And a lot of people do. Instead of paying the 30%, maybe it's a little bit less. Maybe instead of having to pay everything up front, you can get 30 or 60. We have a client that has 90-day terms, and they've also, this part is so important that we've been able to negotiate that they have I think it's 1,000. I was going to say 500 units on the floor ready to go. So they pay 10% for it to sit there, and it might take a few months before the order gets placed, but there's no lag. It's right over, and then once that's done, that triggers the next order to go into the manufacturer. They pay the 10 points, and then the cycle just keeps going. So they can easily fly it out if they need a few products just to get them over, or they can send them by ocean. But it just stops that extra, few weeks of going into production and then figuring it out.
Yeah. We also have a lot of our customers, even though they're FBA, like swear by having like 3PLs on their ground. Because we had customers who were based in Germany but selling in the US, and so they had their 3PL as like the holding facility, and give them a lot more control in terms of just like having as much stock, like keeping the stock, like, there's like the middle ground for FBA. You don't want to be overstocked, and because obviously like the fees are higher and that sort of thing. But at the same time, if you're going to Q4, you want to make sure to have as much available. But by having a 3PL just there as well, you can, get that product in a lot faster with like much lower fees. Another thing we've kind of seen people do, it's not really, I want to say like gaming the system. It's not, it's just like another strategy. But especially for something like Q4, when you'll need a lot of product, is sometimes kind of playing with being able to do fulfillment by merchant in addition to FBA. So sometimes if it's, for instance, like if it's getting closer to, whatever the holiday or season is, I always use like Q4 as the example, or like Christmas. But, maybe at the beginning of December, you're using FBM, fulfillment by merchant, straight from your 3PL, because, there's a little bit more leeway in terms of like when that product gets to the customer. Like if obviously like you don't want the product to get there after Christmas, but if it's from FBM, you have a little bit more flexibility there. But then you can save your really kind of like last minute purchases that you're paying a higher price point for the fees. You can get those out from FBA, but you're starting with FBM and switching over to FBA like closer to like whatever that holiday is, so that if there's any kind of delay, it's on them versus, you're kind of like, oh, that arrived a day after Christmas, like no one wants it anymore.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And just being able to flip it over to FBM, that could be a real safety valve. You just don't know what your season's going to be like. And if you have some back, so, we talk about that whole cycle, working with your supplier, having something over at your 3PL and having a trigger when you get it over to Amazon. And it could be a real lifesaver. And a lot of people don't put that extra condition in when they're creating a listing, so it'll just flip over automatically. And if you don't do that, you can run into some problems.
Yeah, 100%.
So the other thing I'd like to talk about, so we just kind of touched on this, but other mistakes that common mistakes that sellers make. Can you get into a couple of them and let's just not talk about inventory, because I know, with your company, you're also talking about funding. So handling funding as well as inventory.
Yeah. Just to give a little context too on 8Fig and not plug too hard, just, context setting, as I call
Selfish plug.
So yeah, we're a funding and planning platform for e-commerce sellers. We're very like e-commerce focused. We're only e-commerce. Like we only fund e-commerce businesses. So kind of our whole thing is that, we are kind of flexible and, you kind of like build a plan in terms of kind of what I mentioned before about mapping out the supply chain. And then you see those different, batches of inventory, and you see those moments where you're going to need cash the most, because obviously it's a complex system. Your cash is tied up in a lot of different places. So when we fund our sellers, we're funding them at those specific moments where they need that cash flow, so that the money is kind of continuous and flexible. Flexible being like, sometimes you're selling more or less, like things get delayed, and you can change, how much money you're taking. You need more or less, or, payments you kind of need to slow down. All of that's flexible. So that's kind of, funding. Anyways, so some of the things that we see a lot of sellers, probably like more people who are like just getting into, funding for the first time, is this idea of like, how much can I get? What can I qualify for? And that's just slippery slope, just taking money. So that's why we recommend for sellers to really just like sit down and map out like, what do you need? Like, what is kind of, have big goals, like by all means, but also, realistic, and see what do you actually need in terms of those funds? Like, when do you need them? And so that's kind of how we work too, is like, we're not like, oh, you qualify for this much. It's like, okay, what do you need? And either we're like, great, awesome, we can do that. Or maybe we kind of need to work with you on understanding like what's maybe a little more realistic. So that's something we definitely see a lot. And also people just kind of, like, I get it. Like, it's stressful when you need the payments now. You need like, there's so many deadlines you're playing with like all the time. So we see a lot of sellers coming to us being like, oh, I just need this money now. And it's a lot urgent. Like a lot of it's built on urgency, and they haven't necessarily taken the time to understand like, what do they really need? And then, because there are different funding solutions, like maybe they would go a different route. And so it's like, do some research and find like a good fit for you. Don't just take like, and that's how a lot of, some companies get you, is just like, they're able to get the money fastest in your hands. And then later you realize like, okay, maybe this now I'm here, and maybe this wasn't the best fit. So making sure that you're doing that research before you're kind of right at that moment of like, crap.
So funding, we're touching on probably the most important aspect of becoming a seller. And that's simply, it's cash flow. And if it's not done properly, I've bought companies because, and I've warned the company that I bought that they have to make sure that they have the cash flow going into a very competitive market that they hit a home run in. And so it unrolled. So how it unraveled was, the first bit of inventory went very quickly. It was an American-made product. We could get the inventory in right away. We doubled it. And it was another doubling of sales. And then there was another doubling of sales. And that's when the guy was either going to go under or I just bought it up. And the whole process from start to finish, I was trying to work with the person to tell them that you had to be very careful, because their inventory is the only thing that they were taking into consideration. And they weren't talking about ad costs, marketing, any of this.
Mm.
And so this was actually the last company I purchased was because of that issue. One of the other things I just want to talk about cash flow again is this is a question to the listeners. How many of you have actually done a cash flow statement? And when you get your P&L, if you get a P&L, that would be another question. Who has a bookkeeper that's giving you that information? And then are you getting a P&L and a cash flow statement so you know where your cash position is? And then we have, companies like 8Fig that, provide funding. But at the end of the day, you need to know what those numbers look like, so you can intelligently talk to a company like this and get the money that you need. And it's a sweet spot, isn't it? It's like Goldilocks. Too hard, too soft, right in between. And do you guide people into that, like the sweet spot, or is it okay? You do qualify over here, so no problem, but it might be overfunded.
Yeah. So we definitely work with, like, when we're agreeing to kind of the growth plan. So like their kind of continuous funding, we make sure that it is in line with reality in terms of like a lot of it. So none of it is looking at like their credit or anything. It's all just based off of their store. A lot of it is their sales history, and then like other variables like seasonality and that sort of thing. So we'll definitely guide them if they're, looking for money that's, too much, or like something that maybe it's not. And like, I mean, it's usually like, if anything, people might ask for too much versus like not enough. But so we do kind of guide in that sense. And then we are also, we are building things into the platform that will be kind of like little like guideline, like, I don't know what the word is, like bumper. I'm thinking of like, when you bowl when you're like 7 years old and they have the little bumpers.
Yeah.
We're building those into the product. So things that will kind of notify you like, oh, hey, like we saw your sales are slowing down, maybe you should delay like your next batch of inventory, or like, things like that. So there's some things currently in our product, but like we're really focusing on that over the next few months as well. So just kind of like have those kind of smart alerts to let people know, because it's something that it's constant. Like you said, it's always a balance. And one thing I think that's like interesting too is like you can be, your revenue can be great, your profitability can be great, but your cash flow can be crap, And so it's just like, you can be very successful. And when you're looking at all these other kind of KPIs, but yeah, at the end of the day, if you don't actually have that cash available to like further purchase your inventory and further scale, then yeah, like you said, that company you were talking about is like, that's how you can collapse. So you have to kind of be looking at all those indicators.
And of course, that affects your supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So we're at the bottom of the hour. And at this time, if you're new to listening to the podcast, we have an entry, and that's for the hashtag Wheel of Kelsey. Well, probably Wheel of Hayden today, because Kelsey's out enjoying himself. But anyways, it's hashtag Wheel of Kelsey. Tag 2 people, and you will get a second entry. So Emma, what is the giveaway today?
So we have a choose your own adventure kind of giveaway. I can decide between the two. So one is either 10% off our cost of capital. So that's 10% off of the cost of a growth plan if you sign with us, or a really cool crew neck, 8Fig crew neck. They're actually cool. I should be wearing one right now.
They actually are cool. Okay. So
no, sometimes, startup swag is like, you're like, oh, I don't want that. But they're super comfy too.
Okay, great. And we're adding to that a Lunch with Norm mug, and we'll be sending out the 2 to the winner today. So that's hashtag Wheel of Kelsey or Hayden, and tag 2 people, you get a second entry. Now, Hayden, are you on the ball? I can see you shaking your head, thumbs up. Press that button, please. I want to give a quick shout out to an incredible group of sponsors who help keep our podcast running. The Lunch with Norm podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of the following sponsors: Wally Smarter, Post Purchase Pro, VAA Philippines, Jeff Schick Law, Rebate, Honu Worldwide, Extreme Power, Dragonfish Brand Management, and Startup Club. Thank you. And now back to our show. All right, we were back. He did it. I just a round of applause for Hayden.
So good.
Okay, so now let's move on to how does the cash flow factor into the mistakes we just talked about?
Yeah. I guess I kind of touched on it, but in general, like cash flow is what allows you to continue to scale. So like something that we've seen a lot is like, it also depends on kind of what you are trying to achieve. Cause some people just kind of want to have a store with like a little bit of side income. But if you really want to scale, like if you feel that the demand is there, like there is a point where, you are going to run out of your own access to cash. And so you will have to get kind of that money from somewhere, whether it's, with a funding company like 8Fig or elsewhere, because it's just like, that's just kind of the core problem when it comes to growing a store that is, you're selling physical goods, is that money will have to be sunk up front. And so like a lot of times, you're making those payments and then you won't actually get the products until 3 or 4 months later. So there's really just, if you're growing, like if you're trying to stay at the same size, like that's something that potentially you could still manage, but you're going to have to put more and more upfront costs in. And so that's just kind of something that we see a lot of people it is kind of a scary thing, because people think like taking on debt, like that sort of thing is something that, now they're like the shackles or whatever they might call it. But you also think about like buying a house in the way that you do kind of have to make a commitment to grow. But I think obviously I probably shouldn't compare it to buying a house, because I'm not very as well versed in mortgages. I have a house, but outside of that, not super real estate savvy. But yeah, I think a lot of it just needs to be kind of shifting the mindset of, this is, a step that you take in order to grow. And then, you can always assess, you should be balancing what you are taking on in terms of the money versus your potential to grow. Of course, like you should be making forecasts. You should be, looking at those numbers of P&L. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's kind of a problem that all of our sellers hit, is just kind of hit a wall, and they need to kind of get that money from elsewhere, because it's just the natural problem for e-commerce stores.
Yeah, a lot of the times, we'll find even really experienced sellers is that you haven't explored the areas to really cut back and gain profit. It could be on, let's say you're on e-commerce, and it could just be your merchant supplier, right? Your merchant payment, you might be able to get a point back there. Even Amazon, they charge you 4 points on foreign transactions. That's major dollars.
Yeah.
And, just switching over and getting a proper bank set up. So, it might be a small percentage off of that rate, off of the rate exchange rate. And you can save a lot of money. Some people can save tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars just by that, depending on your size. But there's all these little pockets that, there's good debt, there's bad debt. And to grow, there's things that you have to look at. And when you're getting financed, one of the things you want to make sure of is, are you financing properly? Did you go back to the supplier? Are you able to, instead of having your inventory every 4 months or half a year, can you break it up into little bitty bites and have more frequent? And so you have less cash flow. You'll have more cash flow in the end, but less cash up front. But if you do it every month and a half or 2 months rather than 6 months, I've seen a case study. This is Scott Dietz that did this. And he showed me where he saved a company that was actually negative cash flow $480,000 by just moving the time that they purchased their inventory just more frequent. $480,000.
That's
It's
fantastic.
crazy. And
Yeah.
so when you I'm always a little bit nervous when I go in. I go in for any form of funding, but I don't like using my own money. So, there's all sorts of information out there, not to use your own money. So I do like using other forms of capital. And when you do it, I just want to make sure and give you the warning, any listeners that haven't done this, to make sure that you're going in a position of strength, because you can go in and you can get this money, but you won't utilize it properly, or you'll lose a lot of it because you don't know how to properly capitalize what you're doing, and taking those little bits and pieces, like I was just talking about, just more frequent, or just going back and negotiating with your suppliers. So I don't know if you have anything more to say with that. And what I meant by that position of strength is just that you're going in and you're not automatically losing because you haven't negotiated properly with the supply chain.
Yeah, I think also there's the mindset of, I think like position of strength to me also means like you're in a position of potential growth versus like taking money to save your business because it's not doing well.
Yeah.
I think that's a big difference as well, is like if you are looking to the money, like it's one thing if you're looking to get the money to, because like, oh, you ran out of cash, but because of the demand is so high and you have a plan on how to kind of get that cycle going. But it's a whole different thing if you haven't been so successful and then you've run out of cash and now you're looking for more cash to kind of dig yourself out, because that's not necessarily like a healthy mindset. But I also loved what you said about the incremental inventory, which is something that like we definitely believe in, is super important. And like, that's kind of why we try to have the funding be incremental as well, because a lot of times kind of another common mistake is like, a lot of times when you get funding there, like from a bank, like a loan, just like big fat, chunk of cash. And so you are managing a lot of different channels, a lot of different moments, a lot of different vendors. It can be very hard to kind of budget that out accordingly. And so if you're working with smaller incremental pieces of like cash, it's a lot easier to make sure that everything is accounted for and not have anything kind of, just move into areas that, you didn't budget for. Like that sort of thing can happen all the time when you're working with, a lot bigger chunks.
Yeah. Are you seeing that there's any trends right now?
Yeah, I mean, I say trends related to, I guess, less so the big chunks kind of thing that we're talking about, and more of just in general, like given the market, it's not super.
Yeah.
So yeah, so a lot of just like doubling down on the kind of hero products and things that are working. And trying to kind of also what you mentioned before is really looking at all those areas within the supply chain, as well as kind of the products that you're offering, and just cut out the things that aren't working, or at least pause. The ad campaigns that are kind of burning cash and not really giving you the return that you need, the products that just, maybe are too much money to kind of keep bringing those in, as well as, so even though the market, I mean, I guess part of it because the market is not super, and a lot of consumers are not, buying as they were during the pandemic. Shipping cost, like cargo costs, have dropped significantly, or at least like getting like container costs. And so there is a little bit more leverage to negotiate, and like, because a lot of vendors are more willing to, like, they're just trying to get customers. So you can still get some pretty nice price points right now with vendors who will like are willing to kind of take the cut on their costs, because like you will be a good like long-term customer, and in the end it's still profitable for them. So to also really kind of take advantage of this time, even though it's not, you might be winning on container costs and you're not winning on moving the product as you once were, but to kind of like understand where the opportunities are in this market, because there's always, things will quickly reverse when demand does pick back up.
Yeah. Now, this is to the audience. Do you have any comments or questions about supply chain, or have you got into some interesting issues with supply chain? I'd love to hear from you. If you do, just throw it over in the comment section. Okay, so the other thing, I guess we should talk about the levers. Like, what can we use to manage our inventory levels efficiently?
Yeah, so some things that we really recommend is to make sure that you're aligning your inventory strategy is aligned with your like PPC ad campaign strategy, and you're also looking at seasonality and understanding like when you need to be stocking up in advance. Like things that we really recommend is like having 45 to 60 days worth of stock like in FBA, as well as 60 days of stock in your 3PL. So.
Okay. All right. Very good. So, Hayden, I don't think we have any questions, do we?
Nope. This is the first. For me, anyway.
Oh.
They're all worried.
Maybe I was so thorough. That's probably it.
That's it.
That's
Emma, before we go over to the wheel, can we get your contact information?
Oh, yeah, of course. So it's Emma, EMMA, at 8fig.co,
Right. Okay. That's actually a pretty good domain.
Yeah. We did get .com.
Yeah.
So maybe you could try emailing me at .com, but maybe just stick to .co.
Do the .co. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to risk that one.
All right. So if you have any questions or you want more information, check it out, and also check out 8fig. So let's have a last word from our sponsor, then we'll head over to the wheel and we'll get her going. Launching products isn't like it used to be. To successfully launch your product, you need to hit that algorithm from all sides. Driving external sales, boosting social signals, and increasing product listing engagement are fundamental to success. Rebate is the first and only launch platform that delivers across this broad range. Get your product featured on Amazon.live through Rebate's influencer program. With this service, your product gets instant exposure to large audiences of shoppers and permanent placement on Amazon Influencer Storefront, which drives perpetual sales. Run a sweepstakes campaign on Rebate and connect with shoppers off Amazon. And lastly, drive external sales with tried and true deals campaigns. Visit rebate.com today and get started with your 14-day free trial. All right, we're here. Let's do the wheel.
All right.
Do the wheel.
It's time for the Wheel of Kelsey.
Okay.
It's not excessive at all.
No, not at all.
Okay, let me go over the wheel.
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
It's a pretty good chance today.
Yeah. It's a 50-50 split.
Rad. All right, Rad. Somehow I knew you'd get that one.
Amazing.
Nice.
Okay, so you just won a crew neck and a Lunch with Norm mug. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for today.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Now, there is a major hiss coming through. I don't know if that's you, Hayden.
Well, it's maybe me.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, Emma, just hold back. We're going to remove you from the screen, but don't leave. It'll look like you're leaving the screen, or the podcast. Okay, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us this Friday. Want more great information? Don't forget to subscribe by clicking here. Also, If you want to check out our latest podcasts, click over here.
Lunch with Norm.